Okay, I'm alive.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call to order the special council meeting of Tuesday, September the 1st. As always, we are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. It's a great day today. It's always fun when we get to talk about rec projects. So as we get going, we have only one item on the agenda tonight, and we're not going to entertain additions. So can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented, please? Councillor Stout, so moved. All in favor, please use the voting buttons on the right. That carries unanimously. Which brings us to business item 3A, the multi-use field and West Recreation Space. Mr. Studer, where's Paul? There he is. Sorry, it's all on my screen.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. I'd like to thank you for taking the time this evening when we call this special meeting. I know this is a topic that we've talked about a few times this year, and I think everybody's excited to continue talking about that as we move towards a decision on what to do. So I'm going to be asking for 2 recommendations, but I'll just go into a little bit of background so we can get back up to speed for everyone. So this year, the 2020 capital budget, council approved a feasibility study to be done at the existing football field at the Four Seasons Park to determine if that site was a suitable site to do a synthetic multi-use field. The results of that feasibility study came back that there was nothing there that would cause us any great concern, and we could potentially build something like that in that site. We had sought a concept of what that could look like for a full-size CFL field with a FIFA-sized soccer field inside. And I've shown that to council, and you can see that it takes over the bulk of that area now, which of course also has 2 diamonds there, diamonds number 4, diamonds number 5. So if that field was to be constructed there, those diamonds would obviously be impacted and have to be removed. That site currently, the football field is currently used by both minor football as well as the composite high school football program and other groups that use the field as open play. And of course, Blitz Fastball is the predominant user of those 2 diamonds, 4 and 5. As well, in the capital budget this year, we had put a little bit of money aside for what we call the city-owned West 80 acres, I guess, straight west of 50th Ave. Township 505, west of Range Road 243 to be exact, to see what could be done there. Right now, the crop just came off, so that field is available right now. We had, at the time that was in, there was already a crop. He paid for the lease, but we're in a year-to-year lease there, so we can do whatever we want with that going forward. The individual renting that land is fully aware of what has been discussed and what the concept is, and just awaiting direction from us. We've been looking at what we could do out there as far as trying to meet the community needs as an open space or doing more. So we also had in the capital budget $350,000 was earmarked for potentially putting a ball diamond at the Milieu Park. And when we looked at that every which way, it was a very, very tight space. It looks like a big space till you start putting a ball diamond in there. And I shared with council earlier this year that that was going to be a real challenge for many reasons, safety for errant balls, as well as proximity to residents, parking. It goes on and on with the challenges there. As well, when we discussed with Ball, they would accept a small diamond there potentially, but it would not be their preference at the time. So when we looked at all these issues, we tried to figure out how do we bring this together. And then when I came back to council on June 16th, committee of the whole, we discussed the concepts of potentially doing something with the West 80 acres, including up to a dog off leash area, some parking, anywhere from 1 to 4 diamonds potentially. And then that would, if we do that, of course, that would provide us with the opportunity to remove diamonds 4 and 5 at Four Seasons if the multi-use field were to go. So trying to connect all these projects together, strategically thinking as we should going forward for planning in the rec world. I think we all know the challenges we've had in the past with that, as far as trying to fit things in where they may or may not fit. And we use the master plan as a guiding document going forward. And it speaks to that recreation planning being a key component of everything we do, both operationally and capital. So then June 23rd, regular council meeting, administration was directed to take the concepts that we discussed out for public engagement. So that's what we've done. We've been doing that this summer. We did public engagement in 3 main formats. We went online to the community, the general community at large, and we basically showed them the concepts, the multi-use field concepts. We showed them 1, 2, 3, 4 ball diamonds, an off-leash area concept, not specifics on exactly where that could be, just the general vicinity of the 80-acre parcel. We also did 2 virtual open houses where administration invited the public to join in. We had small attendance. I think it was 3 people the first time, and I think we had 16 people on for the second open house. And that was our first real go at a virtual open house. It went pretty well. It was kind of a Q&A after the presentation. There was myself and there was our select engineering consultant who had done the concepts that was there. And we tried to address the questions. A lot of the questions in those open houses were not so much big picture questions. They were more just detail oriented questions, which was great. It gave us a lot of interesting comments and feedback. But those kind of questions would typically come a little bit later when you're actually going to build something. So, and then the last piece we did was direct user group engagement. And I think, you know, now you're going from the large group of the population who may or may not be interested in these projects, right down to the users that you're actually trying to help and work with. And there was a variety of users invited. We got really good attendance from them. And myself and again, Mr. Price, we spent 30 minutes with each group virtually, got direct how they operate, basically, what their needs are. Do they like these concepts that we're throwing out there? And would they support them? Do they see changes that would need to be made? And would they also be actively participating in anything as far as design goes, consultation, working with the other groups, potentially fundraising, grant writing, and all of those topics was overwhelmingly, of course, we would love to work with administration and going forward if anything were to happen. So I think that from a public engagement perspective, it was a success. I mean, we had 300 online surveys. I do have a quick PowerPoint I can summarize. I'm going to try to show you here if I can pull this off. There we go. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, if we can get going here. Sorry, bear with me. So that was the first question, was do you currently use the Four Season Park? You can see the numbers there, 446 responses in total. 59%, 41%, yes to no.
Your presentation's not flipping.
Oh, it's not working?
No.
Can you see anything?
Just the
I
front
can
page.
see just the front page and then the sidebar before it starts to run. So you can see the whole PowerPoint.
All right. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. I apologize.
Technology.
Well, it's not my strong suit apparently.
Yeah, me neither.
I can just read it off.
Yeah, or you can just click on each individual page and it'll come up.
That's what I thought I was
Ready?
doing.
Need to click on from the beginning on the left-hand side at the top. There you go.
I did do that, so I'm just. Can you see the second page?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, do you currently use the field? Four Seasons, yes or no? What activities do you use for the park space? Everything from soccer, disc golf, festivals. You can see the list there. Good responses. 100 responses mentioning baseball, softball, fastball. 60 mentioning running, walking, or cycling. What proposed amenities do you anticipate using at the West Recreation Site? And you can see the numbers there for ball diamonds and dog off leash. We showed them 4 concepts. The one being the dog off leash, 2 being 1 diamond with an off leash, 3 being 2 diamonds with an off leash, and concept 4 was 4 diamonds with an off leash. And overwhelmingly, you can see the respondents there. Concept 4 was 4 diamonds with off leash. Some of the comments around that. Concept 1 was obviously the largest off leash area because it pretty much took about 10 acres. Concept 2 was the 1 diamond and off leash, was some comments around fair balance. Concept 3 would give us back to square. If we took out diamond 4 and 5 at 4 Seasons, we'd be back to just same amount of diamonds in the inventory if we took them out at 4 Seasons. And concept 4 was obviously the most popular. The comments, dog park looks more permanent, potential for phased approach, potential for hosting tournaments because you've got 4 diamonds. So that definitely piqued everybody's interest in that area. A lot of other comments about what people would like to see in the West Rec space, everything from benches and trees and landscaping within the dog area, concessions, washrooms, cycling connections from Beaumont. So there's definitely an appetite that came through there about not just an open space. I think everybody's, thinking about how exciting it could be doing something out there. A lot of other suggestions came in about, could you copy what other communities are doing, emulating what they've done in this sort of a space? Some interesting questions that we put on here just for feedback was, could you put a multi-use field out there? One person asked, what was the need for the project? Fair enough. Concept 2, only get 1 diamond. So those are just some of the examples that I wanted to share with council, the questions. But there was a lot of questions, and overall, the support was definitely there for the concepts that we were showing. And last page, I think. Sorry, I've lost my cursor. There we go. Age category, as you can see, not a surprise. From 25 to 54 was the bulk of the respondents. And one of the questions was just trying to gauge the number of adults, number of children in the house that responded. And there's the numbers to show that. So apologize for the technically challenged slideshow presentation, but I think the message is pretty clear there that we had good feedback, good comments, and they definitely picked which concept that they liked for the West 80 acres. The multi-use field, there was a lot of comments around that. Running track it would come up from time to time, for example. That one comes to mind. There was a little bit of negative about it because some people were concerned it was going to impact other areas of 4 Seasons, but clearly when you look at the concept, that's not the case. It's just really taking out diamonds 4 and 5. I'm just going to close out of this here. Okay. So that leads me to when we spoke with the user group specifically, the overwhelming feedback that we received from that was that there was concern that if whatever we do, we don't take out diamonds 4 and 5 and not replace them. And I think that's something that I think we all understand, and logically speaking, we've already considered that. Obviously, we can't commit anything 100% to the groups in those interviews, but I certainly confirm with them that I understood their position on that. It is, I have the same thought about if you take it out, what are we doing to replace it? Because we know their needs. We know they need more diamonds. For example, 4 and 5 are used by Blitz Fastball. And when we talk to them, they've got, they're growing. They're slated to have 12 to 13 teams in 2020. That was what they were on target for. They are obviously using those diamonds exclusively. And they would like a third diamond. If they were the opportunity to get a third diamond, they would use a third diamond. Minor ball is using that diamond there. It's using the diamond at the Colonial as well. They're sharing those with Slow Pitch. So they're using every available diamond there are, even at the Bellevue, the small rally cap levels are using the two small, they're not even diamonds, obviously, when you look at them, they're really just backstops in an open field. So the notion that was overwhelming from all of the groups, whether it was soccer, blitz, minor ball, and football, was if you're going to do anything, you got to replace those diamonds. So I think that's the message that I would like to convey to council tonight is everybody supports the concepts. It's just the concern around the staging, if you're going to do it, and the construction timing, so that it's not impacting them and they don't lose a season for ball, for example. So when we look at the feedback, everybody has what they would like to see in the West 80. If it was going to be minor baseball, you would construct the diamonds a little differently than if you were just going to have a multi-use diamond for slow pitch, fastball, and minor ball. We started talking strategically about trying to look at the user groups as a hub scenario, for example. So if you had minor ball go to the West Rec, you could then turn over 4 seasons, 3 diamonds that are remaining to blitz potentially. They might have to share the large midget diamond with minor ball, for example, and slow pitch works at Colonial exclusively. Those are some of the conversations that we had. Nothing's in stone right now, obviously. These are just strategically thinking about how to hub them to the user groups in one area, where then they can take a bit of ownership of that area. Because I know minor ball, for example, was very eager to discuss amenities at a potential site at the West 80. Concession, they wanted an announcer booth, the list was quite long, and that's all great. They even suggested that they would help fundraise and work with us on some of that stuff. So that's where, if you look at the strategic hub concept, that's where that conversation went. And I think it's exciting that they took the time to spend with us on this. They appreciate being heard. That was another message that came through. The other group that we met with was the dog off leash advocates, and overwhelmingly support the concept. The concern that I heard from them was temporary, the word temporary. And that's something that I think that they've heard for a long time, obviously pre most of us, I think, but it's been a conversation, I'm told, for a long time about getting a permanent off-leash area. The concept 4 that we had shown, which was the overwhelming favorite, was the 4 diamonds, and we had pitched anywhere from 5 to 7 acres as an off-leash site, which of course the concern was it's not big enough. The temporary area we're using right now is about 0.75 of an acre, just for reference, and that's just on the east side of the BSRC. So going from 0.75 of an acre to 5 to 7 acres is a significant increase in space. That was, of course, based on the concept of a 20-acre parcel at the West 80. You could obviously throw more area for off-leash, but again, the challenge with that site is the ASP that exists, the planning exercise that was done out there, and how do we make it all work? So again, just to reiterate for council, we went out to the public, we engaged them in every way we could. We directly talked to the user groups. We got the feedback that we hoped to get. We got support for the concepts. We just got concerned about staging them so that we don't take things away and not able to replace them for their particular season. So there's some logistical thought around that. There's some planning that we have to do on that. We also don't know what COVID's going to look like in 2021 for play. We were assuming it's going to be green light for to go ahead. We'll know that shortly, probably as the winter activities progress and how that goes, and whether outside activities can improve or can be used like fully up to speed in 21. So the recommendations that I have before council tonight are to reallocate, cancel the Milieu Ball Diamond capital project, reallocate those funds towards developing the West 80 acres for 4 diamonds, an off-leash area with parking, as well as the multi-use field. The second recommendation is I would go back to council for budget 21 for the remaining funds for the diamond area in West 80, as well as the multi-use field. And with that, your worship, I can happily turn it over. I've spoken for a while, and if there's any questions, I'm sure there's a couple, we can delve into it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Studer. I appreciate the presentation and the in-depth way in which it went. And yeah, it's exciting. I can echo your comments about the user groups. They're all very excited and pumped about it. But those are the two big concerns, is to reiterate that of what I heard as well was we got to be careful about the order in which we construct this. Just a couple of things I want to bring to council's attention, because I know at one point we had discussed perhaps getting a fall construction program and getting this project under the roll to take advantage of COVID-19 and the sports programs not running full out. So I guess that's my first question for you, Mr. Studer, is if council decides tonight to roll out a bit of a fall construction program, is that possible still, or have we missed that window?
It depends what we would actually be, thank you, Worship. It depends what we're actually trying to accomplish this fall. We have a lot of detailed design work to do on that west 80 acres. There's a water canal that goes through there. We're looking at how could we incorporate where the ASP shows the MR, and how can we tie that in, because we really don't want to go out and have to amend the ASP. That's another process that could potentially be triggered. So I think we have to look at how best to design it so that it fits in the existing MR allocation, the potentially MR allocation, as well as using that natural wet area as a potential feature to a point in an off-leash area. Those are some of the things we're trying to incorporate there. So that process is going to take a little bit of time. To throw up a fence in an open area right now, yes, we could do that this fall for sure. I could say, because the crop is now off that field. However, that would be a temporary use, and that may be acceptable. That would be a temporary, because I would reiterate the comments I heard time and time again about nobody wants a temporary anything. If we're going to do something, we should look at a permanent solution that's going to be good money spent on meeting the needs for the future, and not a temporary solution. So yes, to answer your question, we could commence with something. We do have a lot of detailed work to do through the planning exercise to get that done. And that was why we had looked at the recommendation for the remaining funds to come at the budget workshop for planning for 2021, because realistically, the bulk of the construction would go in 21 anyway.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Because I do remember back, and I had to dig deep today when I was preparing for this meeting, because I know we have about $2.5 to $3.5 million left in MSI and gas tax fund, as well as the province just gave us $2.3 million in federal or stimulus funding as part of that. But I do know that there's some significant strings attached to the 2021 stimulus or the 2021 stimulus funding that just came out, that $2.3 million. So I do know that we are sitting on the ability to fund this project, but I really was hoping it would go a lot quicker. Open it up to questions from members of council, if they have any. All right, seeing none. Okay, so I'm supportive of the Councilor Barnhart.
I snuck it in there. Sorry, Mayor. Thank you
No,
very
I'm
much.
okay with that. If nobody wants to talk, we'll just get on with the discussion. So go ahead.
I'm sure there are questions. No one wants to be first, so I'll jump out there. I just want to make sure I've got my head around this. The football field is not part of this project at all, although we're kind of preparing for what we're going to do in the behind Four Seasons, behind the high school, and by moving those fields out. So right now, we're just talking about what we would do in the west. Have I got that right?
Your worship, to Councilor Barnhart. How can I phrase this? The support is there for both projects. It's just a matter of how, if council wants to do both projects, it's just how we stage them. The recommendation is we at least reallocate the funds we have in the capital right now, moving into something on the West 81st. And then we can look at how 21 unfolds for us, as far as if we can do both simultaneous. We have to keep in mind the seasons and when we would touch Four Seasons, if that piece is a goal. And then because we don't want to take the diamonds out until they're finished using them for 21, for example. So tonight it's really just reallocating the funds that we have in the capital budget now towards the project. There would be a carryover potentially because we're probably not going to exhaust that amount this fall.
Where my head was at is around the consultation and the engagement. It seemed to be focused on what would you like to see. I got some idea that there was talk about the football field, but I'm not sure if we would get all of the concerns addressed by the people who live close by to Four Seasons, who back onto where the ball diamonds are now. And I'm wondering if that piece is being anticipated in the future before that building goes ahead, because a big football field like that is going to really be, at certain times of the year, something that's going to be great. I'm not against it, I'm for it, but I think people are going to want to weigh in on that. And I'm just wondering whether that is contemplated for another engagement or this was it.
Through your worship, Councilor Barnhart, we could do more engagement on that specifically. However, there was some feedback provided on the online component from some of the residents there. There was one resident against the concept. The thing to remember, though, we're really not changing the use of that space at all. That space currently is used for football right now by the two programs and blitz fastball. So we're just taking away the fastball component, and we potentially might add soccer to use that for sure. They were quite excited at the opportunity, but really, I don't know that the feedback that came in as negative was justified as far as what the concern was. There was a variety of concerns from the one particular resident, but nothing that couldn't be addressed, I think.
So as it stands now, there's no further engagement, or there would be a time once the plans are more fully developed?
There could be. I had not planned to go out again, no.
Yeah,
And
I agree with
to my-
you. It's a
to-
great use of the space, but I do think that there's going to be an enhanced level of use. And I think if anything, people just need the opportunity to know what's going to be there. Anyway, I'll stop at that point, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to further chime in on that conversation, I know myself, I'm thinking that the two projects are, this is one big project, the multi-use field on the west and what's going to go on the west 80. To my mind, if we're going to do planning on it, we can, if we greenlight the planning can go all winter so that construction's ready to start and hit the spring, if that's the way council chooses to go. So I don't really want to divide these projects into two. It would all be one big one in my head going forward. Councilor McGowan-Swain, you're up.
Thanks, Your Worship. Maybe I'll start off by saying, great job on the engagement piece. Administration's crushing that of late, just, making sure we're reaching out to everyone, whether it's online, but also those direct engagements with the user group. So, kudos for all the work there. Appreciate that. I got a list of questions that I'll try and break up into sections. But before I get into more specifics, I'll follow along the lines of Mayor's initial conversations around just the timing of this. And I wonder if you could kind of speak to that a little bit. And I'll admit off the top, I was a bit frustrated to see the recommendation that we're basically kicking the construction to next year. And where that frustration is coming from is, we talked about this, we probably had this conversation 2 years ago about what to do with the 80 acres. And then at budget, which was February, we went through and talked about it and recognized that, at the time, all we provided for the football field was that $75K for the geotechnical study. And I get that, and that was done and great, and some great concept plans that were put in place. But, since February, we've been talking about the use of that and, the design, I guess, for lack of a better term, for the West Acres, it's essentially a parking lot and a dog park and 4 diamonds, right? And so, we had the meeting in June 23rd when we provided that direction, and so now we're here September 1st before we're getting feedback on that. And my worry is that, my concern through the process is that we've potentially missed out on construction out on those West Acres there for the baseball field, so that they could be ready potentially for next year. So just off the top, I was a little bit frustrated at the timing around this. When I say a little bit, maybe that's a little too maybe not strong enough. I was disappointed that this is where we are at here, that we're looking at moving it forward. I know you guys have got a lot on, But I feel council checked in on this multiple times throughout the year, asked how it's going, and constantly the answer back was, no, it's going well, it's going well. We've got the time, we've got the time, we've got the time. And now here we are, and what we're sharing is we don't have the time. And so I recognize that we can adjust. This is just your recommendation, and ultimately we can have that discussion today. And so I appreciate that. I just share my disappointment around the timing of it all. I think the concept that we've got there, concept 4, is exactly what we've been looking for. So I just wanted to share that maybe initial observation up front. And Your Worship, if you don't mind, I'll rattle off a couple of financial questions if that's okay. Thank you. So, the Mayor touched on MSI and federal gas tax. I wonder, I see Mike is on the phone, and maybe Paul, Mr. Suter and Mr. Dow on the line. Can you just provide an overview of what do we have left on that on those municipal grants and that federal grant, the provincial and federal grant, sorry, and then also I wonder if you could answer that 2.3 million. When I read it, I didn't think we could use it for this, but could you just provide some background to see if that's something that could be used for a project such as this?
So to answer the first question, in terms of available funding, the mayor mentioned earlier some numbers around 3.5. That's basically what we would have. Maybe slightly more than that, looking at some numbers that we reviewed today. We would have about 2.8 in MSI and just under $1 million in federal gas tax. So it kind of puts you actually closer to 3.7 is where we would be sitting today, rough estimate. In terms of the stimulus funding program, a lot of the projects for the stimulus program have the same kind of qualifications as the MSI program itself. And so overall, it would be certainly qualifying for it. The one stipulation that they do have is that any project applying for stimulus funding wouldn't typically be a project that would have been done without the stimulus funding. You can argue whether or not that's the case in these situations. My only caution is if we have an approved budget that already had money allocated to these projects, it's a little bit less likely for us to be able to make the case that these projects wouldn't have been done without the stimulus funding. But worst case scenario, you can make the application. If the government at some point said, no, it doesn't really qualify, they would just want the money back. So that would be worst case scenario.
Thank you. Maybe if you don't mind, I'll follow up with a couple of specific financial questions here around that. So you talked about the 3.5, the 3.7 roughly. From my recollection, the football field, multi-use field by the high school, that came in around that number, actually around 3.7 million. That's right, Paul? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I recall 3.2, something like that.
Yeah, and then
high-level number. I'm very cautious to give out a high-level number, as you can imagine, but
oh yeah, for sure. But you did those concepts, right? You got that initial design done and gave us that number, right? So that we had some sort of concept for this. I also just want to confirm that the 350K that we'd already allocated for the baseball diamonds and Colonial there that we're proposing to transfer, that doesn't impact the 3.7 in grants that we have, right?
I'll let Mr. Dollar answer that.
No, it wouldn't. The 350,000 that we had for Colonial is already part of the numbers. It was to be funded from MSI, so it's included in or the 3.7 is not impacted by that.
Yeah. Okay. And so obviously the other thing to consider as part of this is, as we it's great that we've got this grant, these grant dollars. And I'm not a big fan of saving them up for a rainy day when it's pouring outside when it comes to recreation here in Beaumont. So I think we need to be able to use that. But the other things that we've been talking about on council things like that arts facility. So I was curious, we got a presentation about the arts facility. I want to make sure that we're thinking about this, this decision on how to move forward with the bigger picture about, what that Rex and our culture master plan came back with us. So I'm just curious where we're at with that arts facility discussion. We did have a presentation a couple of months back that came in front of us, provided some pretty, I'll say, staggering numbers with regards to what that may cost. So I'm just curious if administration has got any more thoughts around that. I appreciate that's not specific for this discussion today, but I'm just curious on, maybe around timing or around when a further discussion on that would occur.
We're not going to go down too far into this rabbit hole, though, Councillor, because it is really off topic. But I'll let Mr. Suter take a quick shot at it.
I would disagree that it's off topic. I mean, we're looking at spending 3.5 for the football field plus X for the West Acres, right? We need to look at this in bigger picture of what this is going to do, and I assume that's part of the recommendation of why we bring this back to budget. But I do think this is part of the discussion today.
Through your worship to Councillor Monkoff-Swain, yes, the takeaway that administration had from when the consultant presented to council was to look at some other options. There was some retrofitting and expansion possibilities on a BCC, for example. And another option was to look at just a theater attached to a school. And another option could be something at the library, for example. So he's working on that now, and we'll be back to council hopefully right away.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe your worship, those are kind of the financial questions. I'll yield for a little while, give others a chance before I kind of dive back into some more specifics. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. I guess I'll start with the engagement portion. I think I know that I was really happy with how that went. The fact that we were able to get out and talk one-on-one with user groups was very important. The fact that I believe Mr. Suter letters were handed out to those neighbors on the east side of that football field, that is better communication than has happened in past. So that's really good. The number of surveys, the feedback received, and the fact that we're here talking about that all together tonight is all very good. And kudos to that for the communication side of that piece. When it comes to the construction and getting things done, I don't know if I had higher expectations or if I had ill-placed expectations, but myself, I distinctly recall, pointed questions asked along the way throughout the year here around, if we get this, can we get it done? If we get this, can we get it done? So from myself, I was surprised when I saw us wanting to punt some things into 2021. On the other side of things, I do understand that there's a budget process in play, and following on Councillor Monkoff-Swain's comments around the arts facility, I think that really does matter, because we actually have a policy that states there's a percentage to be spent on arts when you spend on sport, and we're just standing up an arts committee, and we're just in the throes of a recreation, parks, and culture committee, which is trying to tie all those things together. So I think that does go hand in hand. So I think before we have a motion and start debate, I'll stop there for right now and save some other comments here for once we get into the debate portion of the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, CEO would like to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Stewart, and through the rest of council. I want to talk about the timeline, and I know I had some words with Councillor Monkoff-Swain yesterday, so I think it's worthwhile for the rest of council and the community to understand from our perspective. We had up until June fully made decisions based on fact and based on the ability to get this done. We've gone out to the public, and the public has said, we need this staged. We don't want to lose those diamonds. That changes the playing field for us, pardon the pun. So what we're suggesting tonight is what we believe is what the public wants and is the best use of the taxpayers' time and money. If you would like us to build that facility, we can do it. It's just a matter of throwing some money at it. It's a matter of not listening to the public and going ahead and removing those wall diamonds. this has been an extremely extraordinary year for everybody. So to hear words like disappointed and frustrated, I just don't think that's fair at all. So I just wanted to clarify that right now. We can do whatever you want us to do.
Sorry, didn't unmute. Thanks very much. Councillor Danwick, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two questions. In response to CEO Schwartz's comments on the timeline, I'm wondering perhaps with the phased approach, if there's still time to actually do the concept 4 on the 80 acres west of Beaumont and doing it this coming fall. My second part of my question is to Mr. Dowler. I know we have the motion this evening. One of the motions this evening is to reallocate the $350,000 from the Milieu Park ball diamond project towards the 4 diamonds concept 4 in the 80 acres. That is about $350,000 as we know from the motion. Now, I remember earlier this year, we talked about some very ballpark figures, Mr. Suter, about approximately 800 to 900,000 would do the 4 diamonds and the dog park potentially in the 80 acres west of town. Mr. Dowler, I know we have approximately 425,000 from last year's operating budget surplus we've allocated towards capital. Could that not be allocated as well towards this project, which in my mind gives us the funds we need to do this 80 acres approximately, not exactly dollar for dollar tonight for argument's sake, but I understand we have some surplus there that would be on top of the 3.7 in MSI and gas tax is my understanding. Is that correct from last year's operating surplus? It's gone to capital reserve, is it not? Which could be used towards this project if we wanted to.
Yeah, certainly the surplus from last year was moved into reserves essentially. And so
Oh, I think you froze.
requests that
I'm sorry, Mr. Dowler, you froze up there.
yeah,
Am I
sorry.
the only one that missed it?
I was just we'll try it again. The surplus from last year did get transferred into a reserve, and those reserve dollars are available to utilize on a one-time basis as council sees fit from a capital project perspective. So long answer to the question, but yes, there's funds available within reserve that could be utilized as well.
So if I may follow Mr. Mayor Stewart, so then based on that answer back, we would have the funds available from the 350 transfer from the Milieu project and the 425 from last year's operating surplus. If we wanted to put the money for this 80 acre project concept 4 and build it this fall if we wanted to. It's a bit long, tight on the timeline possibly, but I do understand the phasing project. It makes sense to me to build the 4 diamonds either this fall or early next spring, so they're ready to go for the ball season before we get rid of the 2 diamonds at the football field. They are similar projects, but the phasing is very important, and we will all recognize that. So I think the 4 diamonds need to be definitely constructed first, and then we can worry about doing the multi-use field should it pass through capital budget here coming up for 2021, and build the multi-use field in 2021 in time for the football season and soccer and so on. So I think we could definitely do it as the public wanted to have in a staged approach. We've all talked about not destroying without replacing it first, and we're very aware of that concern. So I think we could definitely build the 4 diamonds and the dog park either later this year. We have the funds available without doing any kind of reallocation. If council chooses to use that surplus, as I mentioned earlier, if we wanted to, we haven't discussed that yet, but it's a possibility. And Mr. Dollar mentioned a moment ago. Thank you.
Well, one of the things that we have to decide tonight, once we get through this initial questioning phase, is which concept we are going to go with, whether it's concepts 1, 2, 3, or 4. So right now we're all assuming that we want to build 4 diamonds, but we haven't actually put that to a vote and tested that
Right.
yet.
Thank you.
But there was a second part to your question about time frame.
No, I think I made my point more or less for right now. Thank you very much. I'll yield the floor to other councillors for now. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Hendricks, followed by Councillor Monkowski.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I was just going to, I was agreeing with Councillor Danlock, really. He said most of the things I was going to say. So yes, if we are following the results of the public engagement, then we have to have at least 2 new ball diamonds available before we destroy the other 2 in order to create the football field. So for me, it's, this is all conditional on getting at least 2 new diamonds built this fall or early next spring at the latest. And if it's 4, then depending on the results of what we vote for, then that's preferable to 2 in terms of the availability. But the timeline is the critical thing. So I want to reiterate, yeah, we really have to, and how realistic is it to get them built this fall, given that, if I read correctly, the Farmer's Almanac's predicting an early and severe winter, which I assume would halt construction, but correct me if I'm wrong, please. Mr. Suter, Mr. Schwartz.
Through your worship, Councillor Stout, yeah, being cautious, I would say no, we would not be finished this fall. The critical piece is the placement of those diamonds and that off leash, so that unless we're looking at it as a temporary solution. If we're looking at it as a permanent solution, we have to have put it in the right place where it fits as best as it can in that ASP, so we don't have to trigger any more work through the process. If we were only viewing this as a temporary solution, then it wouldn't matter. So I guess that's another question to pose potentially.
Yes.
If we're going to do it as a permanent long-term plan, then it will take more time to get that to where it needs to live. However, we could potentially start before winter on something and then see where we land and continue after winter. That would be the ideal situation.
We'll add that permanent or temporary to the question, to the motions on the concept. So we'll get.
Can I follow that up with one then, which is what would be the cost of the temporary? If we build a temporary solution and then have to scrub the whole thing because the permanent solution is a different placement and things moving around, so we basically do we waste the full cost of creating a temporary one, and what would that cost be?
I think the cost is going to be pretty close to the same if you're going to have a usable space to meet the needs of what the users expect.
Okay. Thank you. Which seems to mean that we don't want to do a temporary one to me, but as we have to spend the same money then twice if we have to rebuild it. Is that correct? Is that what you're telling us?
Through your worship, to Councillor Stone, yes. I mean, temporary is an interesting word because it's temporary until it's not. So you could say that it goes wherever you want, and as the development grows, then we'll adjust. And I think the opportunity, I don't want to be the naysayer, the opportunity to amend that neighborhood plan, whatever you call that, ASP neighborhood plan, is there in the future. It's just hard for me to say that today. That's why I'm being very cautious as to where we would place that. So, because I wouldn't like to see that have to go away again. I think the users wouldn't want that. So we'd have to look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Stewart?
CEO? Yeah.
Just wanted to follow up on what Paul's saying about the temporary, and you're right, temporary can be 25 years, quite frankly. And Eleanor, if you can correct me if I'm wrong here, we wouldn't need to change any area structure plans or anything else for a temporary facility, correct?
You are correct. Sorry, I'm just fiddling with my buttons here. You're correct. Not right now. For further development to go forward in the Elon area structure plan, a neighborhood structure plan needs to be created. But because this is a sports field and a dog park, it fits within the agricultural use that's currently there. So there's no amendments needed at this time. But because those lands are planned for further central urban area, a neighborhood structure plan would go forward first. And during that process, if these facilities needed to be moved, they would be planned for during that process and moved accordingly.
And so what if we wanted to make it more or less permanent and not waste the money and not move them later? Would we have to do that work now, or could the neighborhood structure plan be built around it later?
Thank you, Your Worship. I mean, council can decide to choose whatever course that they wish. I would be hesitant to make this permanent at this time, simply because of the densities and everything else that was planned to go forward. That was planned as a second city center for Beaumont. And to make that permanent would be putting ball diamonds in a dog park in what would be the city center. So there would have to be further planning that would go around that. Building the services out there, if you were to support this, that's not a lost investment. But the money that you put into fencing a dog park or some of the ball diamonds, you know, if nothing develops there for 25 years, that could still be a pretty good investment for 25 years.
Fair enough. Councilor Hendricks? You're still on mute, Councilor.
Thank you. Maybe just straight to Mr. Suter for a question. We've got concept plans to take those and turn them into working drawings and you know, something that can be bid on. How close are we to getting that phase started?
Through your worship to Councilor Hendricks, he's working on that now. So very, very quickly.
Okay, so we're rapidly working towards a set of civil drawings, dealing with drainage issues, power, whatever, right? Are these gonna be lighted diamonds?
Potentially.
Okay. And they'll have their own, not only fenced areas, but dugouts, built dugouts? Okay, thank you.
That's what we heard through engagement for sure.
Yep.
Those kind of amenities are definitely on the list there. Yes.
Right. So really the clock's on the designer, the engineer, whoever's doing the work, to give us something that's can be agreed to and signed off, and also get it out for quotation. We are at the end of the season, so got to get it out as quickly as possible. Certainly a challenge, and hopefully the Farmer's Almanac's wrong, and you know, we get to a place where we can get this done. The word temporary or permanent, anytime we spend money, that money's spent permanently. So hopefully it means that we're going to have something that we can all be proud of for a long period of time. When that 80 acres was purchased by the previous councils, the idea was that it could also be used as a swap for other lands in the area. But if we're happy with where it is now, let's go. Let's get after it. But we got to pull the trigger on the design. That's ultimately what's going to hurt the timeline one way or the other. And if they can get it done in time and Mother Nature leaves us alone, we could be fine. So.
Fair enough. Okay, so just before we get into discussing design, reallocating the funds and whatnot, Councillor Munkhoff Swain and Councillor Van Newkirk, questions, and then we will move into some motions. Councillor Munkhoff Swain.
Thanks, Your Worship, and apologies if the audio is not great. I heard some comments that it's not great. Let me quickly just address the comment from CAO Schwartz. I feel like I got to respond to that. I found that unhelpful, saying things like, you know, we're choosing to do something, not listening to the public. No one said that. You know, we fully recognise that this needs to be a staged process. When you're talking about the football field, what we've been talking about, I've been talking about is out on the West Acres. But no reason why we need to wait for that to be phased. So just to address that comment there. The question that I had there, Paul, I think people have kind of asked around in multiple different ways, but maybe you can just clarify. You know, if we did provide direction, can we get the construction done? You know, yes, Weather's Almanac and all that sort of stuff. I understand that, but like, is it something that we can, if we provided that to you, and we'll get into debate later, but is that something that we can get into this year? What is the actual process for that? Like, it's one thing to put shale down and build a fence, but I assume we're going to seed this, and how long does that take? Like, would that potentially be ready for May next year? Is that even possible? I have no idea. So I'm just curious around that timing. If we were able to get that package out and constructed, could they potentially be playing on that next year in late April, early May, and then potentially free up time to do the construction of the multi-purpose field next year?
Through your worship to Councilor Monkoff Swain. In a perfect world, yes, that would be the exact timeline we'd love to see. And that's why I've had them working on this design in the background anyway. So I think he's real close to pulling that trigger, like Councilor Hendricks mentioned, and getting that package out. What we have to do there is, obviously, once we know where it's going, we've got to get a road approach and access in there. We've got to get strip the area, work that up, get the fence in. And then shale is easy to bring in. That's not the concern. It's just the grading, making sure the water is addressed, whatever the drainage is in that space. And then you can hydroseed it, you can sod it very quickly. Again, weather is always against us. The spring, see what that looks like. I have to be somewhat cautious here that you could be playing on that in the spring, to be honest. But I will go back to what the user groups, when we talked about this sort of stuff, they were fully aware of the challenges around construction and the timing. And, they're prepared to wait. I don't feel that anybody's in a rush here as far as the user groups are going. Definitely, they're prepared to wait. They understand they're going to get an improvement, an enhancement in what they want. And how it goes, the biggest thing is they want it. That's what we heard loud and clear from them. And the timing around it doesn't matter to them, as long as we're not impacting losing a season for them. That's the key there. So it's a long answer to your question, but I hope I have answered.
No, it's fair, and I'm not asking you to promise that she'll be ready to go, but I will add that there are some user groups who are waiting on this, and football, for example, rugby, they're not able to play here at home because that field is unsafe, and they're not able to do that. So we delay this more, then that's another year delay for them, right? So there are user groups who are looking for this space to be updated and revitalized for sure. So while I appreciate all the ball sports sensitivities around there, they're looking for more diamonds. I get that, but the other user groups are hoping that we can get this project up and running quickly. Just had a question on the we keep calling it a dog park. I like the language you used around the dog facility space or something like that, because I think all the feedback, you see it in your report, you've heard it from everyone to us. What they don't want is just a field. And they don't just want 6, 5, 7 acres of a field. So obviously first step is to fence it, but then will you be coming back as part of the 2021 project budget cycle to look at those different amenities, or would we be including that in this initial update package, things like the benches and the trees and shrubbery and that sort of thing?
Through your worship to Councilor Monkoff Swain, yes, we've heard about the amenities that would make those folks happy. There's actually a guide for building off leash areas that I've found. So it gives you everything, where to pick a site from soup to nuts. So I've had a look at that. I've been to many off leash areas myself. Some of them are open spaces and some of them have lots of good stuff. So my intention would be this would be incorporated as part of it. There was comment around they would love to be involved in that as well when it gets down to that detail. And we would certainly have time to do that. For sure.
Great. Yeah, no, that's excellent. Good to hear. Just a quick follow up on that off leash area. We're showing concepts of 7 acres being the maximum. Recognizing, and I'll try not to get into the permanent versus temporary discussion, but we've got 80 acres there that aren't going to be touched for a long time. So have we thought about if we're thinking to stay within that ASP, maybe the 7 acres is all we can do from a quote unquote permanent perspective, but can we open that up for temporary to we've got 80 acres there that nothing's going to be on. So have we thought about maybe opening up that is and just fully being upfront from the start that this is a temporary space to add additional acres to the park, recognizing that down the road that doesn't fit within the ASP. Have we thought about that? I mean, obviously it's a little bit more fencing, but that's relatively inexpensive.
Through your worship to Council Monkoff Swain, it's just how you frame it to the group, because if you give it, then you take it away, and as long as, like you say, it has to be framed well from the start, so everybody's clear on the plan. Yes.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I think, you know, in my conversations anyway, rather have 7 acres plus some additional temporary space now and then take it away than just have the 7 acres. And again, I know I'm using 7 acres when voted on that. I recognize that. So no, I appreciate that, that feedback there. The last question I had was on your design, and just quickly going to the ball diamonds out there on the west, the design for option 4, you know, the diamonds are, I'll say, quite spaced quite closely together. And I'm sure you heard this feedback as well, but, you know, it'd be great if we could maybe open that space out a little bit. You know, looking at Leduc, for example, where I've got that good picnic camp, not campground, but that space in the middle of the area with a big kind of shelter where, you know, you can have those tournament plays and a place for people to sit and grab a drink and have some food in between and that sort of thing. So, you know, I get those initial concepts that were going out there, but I assume we've got room to consider that. Obviously, tournament players would be a huge bonus to bring folks into the community and economic driver as well. So we've got room to kind of adjust that.
Through to Council Monkoff Swain, yes, we've 80 acres, as you say. So he's looking at different scenarios. Some people are for the quad configuration. Some people don't like that, depending, because you're really looking, if you're going to do baseball, you're going to do two 225s, I think it is, a 275, and then a 400 potentially for the upper levels. So you wouldn't do that in a quad. Maybe you'd look at a different scenario. So those things are all being looked at right now.
Okay, thank you. That concludes my question. Thanks, John, for allowing me to rattle through all this.
Thank you, Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Barnhart, and then we're going to get into some motions.
Yeah, thank you. We've had lots of good discussion and questions here so far. The piece I wanted to quiz Mr. Suter or Ms. Mohammed on is that planning piece that was alluded to. We haven't talked about that a whole bunch, but Mr. Suter, maybe you mentioned the MR considerations moving forward if is built in this book. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? I don't quite understand that train of thought. And then I'd have a second question, would be the bigger picture that Ms. Mohammed was talking about with, you know, formerly planned to be a city center, and now there's going to be ball diamonds there. So I'd just like to elaborate on those couple of thoughts, if you would mind, please.
Through your worship to Council Van Newkirk. Yeah, I was mainly talking about the MR that would be dedicated as part of that ASP. If this facility could be incorporated in the existing space, or we may have to have a larger MR dedication than would be typically for that size, as 10% would give you, what, 8 acres out of 80. So you'd be looking at a little bit larger. That may be the quicker way to navigate through any amendment or any change there, but as opposed to just randomly picking another location in that ASP. That was the thought behind that comment.
Okay, so then the fact that the municipality owns this 80 acres, is that going to let a developer off the hook for the percentage of MR that's going to be in the development that they would have around the land that we own then? Is that what will happen here?
I'm going to defer to Ms. Mohammed on that.
Through your worship to Councillor Van Newkirk. No, every quarter section or 80, there's a 10% MR requirement. There are lots of ways moving forward, depending on where council wants to go with this. We can look at these facilities as something that lasts out 25 years. There's so many options in terms of phasing with area structure plans or neighborhood structure plans. Once development gets going out there, you can start it at one side, and then this side is, you know, slower to develop, so it buys you more time. When things develop, you can take, depending on who's developing and when, you can ask for MRs to be grouped together. So like 10% off this quarter section would be lined up with the 10% off the adjacent quarter section. So then you have more lands to bring together for a recreational use. There's other things that the 80-acre parcel might be needed for in the future. You could be looking at schools, institutional use, all sorts of different uses that we might want to consider. Our most pressing need right now is certainly the recreational space. But as we all always know, like the context is continually changing in terms of the demands being put on the municipality. So even if this were now to be used for dog park and ball diamonds, what I was trying to say is even if we were to revisit the plan, open it back up, you can still guarantee that there's a dog park there and ball diamonds there. And maybe in the future where we're putting it right now doesn't make sense anymore for the city of Beaumont. And it makes more sense to put it in a new MR spot. So just kind of thinking about that, but building it today, these types of uses like a dog park and a ball diamond, they're actually really good, really great interim uses because it's really easy to come in and build on top of it. There's not a lot of stuff that you're moving or ripping up. I mean, a dugout or shelter is nothing compared to something that's been paved, parking lot, and all these other expensive things that could be put in there.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thank you very much.
Councilor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just I wanted to follow up on my earlier comment about the one big project. I'm wondering, given the concern about time and the imperative to get the ball diamonds done so that next season can go ahead, is there any advantage of putting these projects into 2 projects rather than 1? From a design standpoint, does everything have to be done? And maybe this is a question for Mr. Suter or Mr. Swerts in terms of, is breaking it into 2 projects going to be quicker to get the ball diamonds done on a quicker timeline?
Through your worship to Councilor Barnhart, they really are 2 projects. The design are independently of each other, and you could certainly start the one without the other. And I think that's the way it would be happening. I think what his worship was just talking about, maybe the bigger picture, I guess, as one project, but truly they are individual projects that are linked together in so much as the phasing of the construction, the timing, the relationship to them. However, they're definitely individual projects.
Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no further questions or comments, I guess we should start down onto some motions. So I guess the first thing we need to decide right now is which concept are we going to support for the West 80? Is that concept 1, 2, 3, or 4? Is there a member of council willing to move a motion on that? Or I'm prepared to move. Councilor Down.
I'll move concept 4, please. Is that what you're looking for?
Thank
Is it
you.
that simple?
Lucky, that's simple. And what we're talking about is concept 4 in principle. Mr. Suter, you're going to get some detailed design done on that. So we're talking about building 4 diamonds, dog park, parking lot approach.
Yes, your worship. That's overwhelmingly what we heard from the public as well. So we've been planning that in the background anyway. Yes.
Okay. So discussion on the motion, all on concept 4. Councilor Montgomery.
Yeah, thanks. So I support the motion from Councillor Danlock. I did have a question though. You presented kind of 5 and 6 and then 7 acres with regards to the off-leash area. So I would be in support of the 7, but I would challenge administration to go back and take a look at, we came up with 20, just kind of a number, and I recognize you're going to look at that potential water feature. I use that term very loosely, water feature, but that area, you're trying to figure that out. So I hope that we're not, by moving this option, we're not limiting you to just that 20 acres, and that you'll do what's best for that space going forward, given the conversation we had about the longer term play for that. So I just want to make sure that we give that clear direction back to the quote unquote the dog park people, the off leash space, that there's at least that 7 acre parcel that I support anyway.
Councilor Stout.
Thank you, Worship. Yes. Yeah, I support the motion too. I think really if we're following the results around public engagement, then it really has to be concept 4. I really don't see very much popular support for any of the others. based on the numbers that were presented. I was wondering too about the dog park. That's 5 to 7 acres. Do we need to be more specific than that? Does that include maybe some water features, as Councillor Monkoff-Swain was and Mr. Suter had mentioned earlier? And does that include extra features in the dog park, as was suggested in the public engagement survey? Do we need to put a little, I guess the question I'm really asking is, do we need to put a little more clarity around the terms of the dog park there before we go ahead and say, yes, that's concept 4?
Mr. Suter, response or?
Through your worship to Councillor Stout, I think that 5 to 7 acres was, based on the theory that we'd only have so much room there to work with. Obviously, we have a lot more room right now to work with. So as Councillor Monkoff-Swain had mentioned, we could certainly make it larger for now, with the fully understanding that it could one day be clawed back to a more reasonable size as the development and the neighborhoods grow around it. Obviously, just more fence that we required potentially there. That's all. And I think that we could look at that right now for sure as an option. That's from a design perspective, that's very minimal. But I do think some of those features that were made clear to us through engagement, we would have to incorporate in this, at least in most of it anywhere. There's some portion of it, the 5 to 7 acre portion potentially.
Yeah, I would stick to a 5 to 7 acre portion depending on room available. And if council's okay with that, we can let the designer figure that 5 to 7 acre portion out as the more permanent side. Or we can give them a number that we'd like to see. But the reality is this can be an ongoing work too. I mean, we put a certain number of amenities in, and then we can work with the user groups to improve it over time. It doesn't have to be a 100% project right now. I mean, I don't think we're looking at when council originally discussed this concept back when, we were talking about no lights, no water, or porta potties. So things like lighting can, if we plan it right, can come in later and keep the cost down and build this park out over time. We don't have to do the Taj Mahal, so to speak, right off the hop. We can make it minimally serviceable or not minimally serviceable, but serviceable, and then add in all the niceties at a future date, and we can work with the groups. We got a great project going in Baja right now with the rink. I mean, I don't see why we couldn't do it with ball and with football and other groups in town too. Is council okay with leaving it in the hands of the designer for the 5 to 7? And then if we can look at fencing off some more later, we can look at fencing off some more later.
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would be fine with what you just said there. I was going to ask if we needed to put a little bit more clarity around the spacing in between the 4. I know Councillor Monkoff-Swain talked about that in the questioning section, but now that the motion is put forward, I would reiterate that spacing in between the 4 to be adequate, but I don't know what adequate is. Too close is too close, and too much is too much. Hopefully the designer will be able to help us out a bit there, right? We were constantly referred to Leduc, for the spacing, and I don't know how they came about that, or they just decided that one day, or if it's a design principle. I don't know what it is, but anyways, enough rambling. Happy to support 4. Would like to make sure we consider the distancing. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Further questions or comments from members of council on this particular motion?
No.
All right, seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That carries unanimously for concept 4, so we will proceed on that basis. So there's 2 more things I want to cover tonight. One is we need to vote to reallocate the funds, and then another thing is I just want to put a little clarity around schedule, so that it's in council's head and the administration can go forward. So is there a member of council willing to move the funds? Councilor Danlott?
Your worship, do you want me to read the entire motion or simply say so moved? What's easier for you?
Yeah, well, I didn't read it, so if you read it, I don't have to.
Okay, no problem. So I move that council approve the reallocation of the approved $250,000 in the 2020 capital budget for a ball diamond milieu park to be approved capital project for the 80 acres for the detailed design of ball diamonds and construction of an off-leash dog park to be located in the city's west acres, northeast 28-50-24-4 on Township Road 505 west of Range Road 243. That's a mouthful.
Discussion on the motion. Councillor Montgomery.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I'm not sure if I either don't support the motion or I'm looking for friendly amendments. So you coach me through this. So a couple of things. One, we're just reallocating some of the funding. I'm not sure that's enough. So maybe we need to add, if we're looking at 4 diamonds, do we need to add, some additional coverage from MSI or the federal gas tax type thing to make sure that administration has enough funds to be able to execute the project that we're approving option 4. So that's one.
That's the next. Yeah, that's the next conversation is schedule and funding. If we're okay with depending on what we want to see for a schedule, and if we want to see some construction get off, we're going to have to allocate some more funds. But that's the next conversation. This is just a budget reallocation adjustment of one line item. So I like where you're thinking. You're on the right track. It's a separate motion.
Okay, I'll shut up and I'll support the motion and look forward to the next one. Thanks. Appreciate the coaching.
Okay. Seeing no further requests to speak, all those in favor of reallocating the funds from Milieu to the West Rec? And then Councillor Stout. All those opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Which brings us now to the next question. So, and Min may have to help us out here. So if we wanted to try to, because I think we're all agreed we got to get those ball diamonds under construction first. But if we want to try and get some construction done, we're going to need to add some money to this project. I'm pretty sure that the funding for the multi-use field, which will get done after the diamonds, can come at budget 2021. But if we wanted to allocate money towards to make sure that if we can go, what would be a suitable number, and what are the likelihood we can actually go? Mr. Sear or Mr. Schwartz?
Your Worship, a high level number, I'll be cautious here, for the diamonds, the road, the parking lot, the off leash, it's going to be 1 to 1.2.
Okay. And so have we, with the 350, the 80, some of that we've already expended, does that include expenditures, or do we need another 750 grand, give or take?
We haven't
I'm doing my math.
Yeah, so between Your Worship, between the 350 that was earmarked for Milieu, and we had 75,000 for the 80, so we're at 425. We haven't expensed really anything there yet. Just a small
So if we
amount.
allocated another 750,000, that would cover it off if we get construction on the, bearing in mind that we're probably going to carry into the spring if the weather catches us.
Bearing in mind, we wouldn't expense that a full amount this fall. There's no way that would just not be realistic to pitch that. I think we would expense, what we could get done, and then it stops, and then we pick it up in the spring again. So I don't know exactly how far we could get. I mean, we'll do the best we can and go from there.
CAO?
Mr. Dowler, you can weigh in here and correct me if I'm wrong, but a recommendation I would make is to approve the budget, the entire budget, and then we can carry it over when we have 2021 budget deliberations, rather than try to nail down what we think we can spend this year. Mr. Dowler, you probably got a better way to do that.
Not necessarily a better way, just would agree with that. I think it's better to approve an amount that we think will take the project to completion. I think unfortunately we're picking a number, somewhat guessing at a number, I guess. The detailed design is really the piece that'll give us a solid number on that. So just a word of caution, we could put a number out today and we could be back in a couple of months asking for more money to get the project to completion. once that
Well, let me-
design is complete.
Well, let me ask, maybe this is a better way to handle this then. Because we now have 300 or 425,000 allocated towards this project. That for sure will get us through the detailed design and get it out to tender. And then come back with a budget ask to fund the remainder. And we will take it from, we know we have room in our MSI and gas tax. Or we can, is that, but I'd like to see, but I don't want to see the lack of a budget tonight slow this project down. If we can get construction going, I'd like to see some construction go. So is that a better way to handle this, Mr. Dollar?
You know, from my perspective, it would be. And if there becomes a point in time where, given the weather is working with us, and we can definitely get the project moving to do some construction this year and everything aligns, then there's nothing stopping us from coming back at some point with the detailed design and a more solid number on what it's going to take to complete the project and get that approved so that the project can continue into construction. Like I believe Mr. Suter said, there's likely going to be a pause at some point regardless, and then have to pick it back up in the new year. But there may be a likelihood that that doesn't happen. Either way, I think with the money that's been approved tonight, we can get the detailed design done, the project continues, and then we can come back to council when we have a more solid number on what it takes to do the actual construction on the diamonds.
Okay. Thank you. And council, are you comfortable with that, knowing that there could be a possibly, with rough figures we've heard tonight, an $800,000 ask coming back in the near future?
Yep.
Just looking for some nods. All right, open it up for comment. Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Margoff-May.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question for Mr. Dowler. Given the MSI allocation for Beaumont, are we under any, how would I say this, timing pressures from the provincial government? We had, I believe the mayor had shared that maybe one of the regional municipalities hadn't used their MSI and were being questioned by the provincial government about even needing it. Or do we see any provincial pressures to allocate the MSI sooner than later to make sure that it is not removed from us?
I can throw in on that one too. Go ahead.
Sure, I'll take a shot at it, and then some others can help out. From what I understand, the provincial government is changing the way they're doing the allocations this year, in that unlike prior years where they would just send out the dollars at a point in time in the year, they are not doing that this year. So from a cash perspective, we wouldn't be getting our allocation until we spent the money that was previously allocated. So from the perspective of, are we in jeopardy of losing the grant? I don't believe we are. It's a matter of the timing of when we would get that grant. Previously, we would have probably had all of it or a portion already. Provincial government is not doing that this year. They are holding off until we actually need the money.
Yeah, and that's the information that I've gotten back from other municipal colleagues and conversations I've had with ministers and other MLAs, is that it's a bit of a gate system because they're trying to manage the cash flow with the COVID-19 pandemic. We're not losing our allocation, but if we don't have bills to pay with it, we'll be relegated to February 2021 before they give us our next. So it's not that we're losing it, it's just when do we get paid? Is my understanding as to what's happening. And of course, we will get new allocation in 2021 again, which will add to our grant pool. However, get ready for cuts.
And that's my point. So 425,000 of approved funds right now. I think that's a prudent way to do it. And no surprise that council wants to get shovels in the ground. No surprise since February, in my opinion. But in the fiscal environment that we're in right now, I wonder if there isn't a conversation to be had about allocating the MSI to this project now and committing to that money now, or committing that money to this project now, because we'd sure be in a tough spot if we're talking about using it today and 6 weeks or 3 months from now, the MSIs get slashed by 25 or 30%, and all of a sudden we're behind the buck because we hadn't allocated them to a project. So how do we have that conversation, Mayor? I support the 425 that you're saying, and Mr. Dowler agrees with around, let's use the approved funds, because that's I think the right thing to do now, and good idea. But how do we have the conversation about allocating the MSI to this project so that we don't lose our opportunity at that money, or do we literally have to spend it before we can send in an invoice?
Mr. Dowler? I'm not sure how that works. I'm pretty sure I think we have to have it allocated, not necessarily spent, but I'm going to defer to Mr. Dowler.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a two-step process. The first step is getting the project approved by the province to use the dollars, and that's a fairly easy, straightforward process. The second part, though, is actually having the bills to pay, or having paid the bills in order to get essentially reimbursed from the province. So, I mean, we can go through one step, as you kind of suggest, Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, and allocate it to the project. We still wouldn't be getting the cash until we actually incur those expenditures. So,
Yeah.
I think the first step does provide a little bit more certainty maybe around getting the dollars than we currently have, with no project allocated to it or submitted. But yeah, until we actually incur any expenditures, we're not going to get the cash from the province.
Yeah, maybe just a follow-up, Mayor. So I think that, given that our budget deliberations should be coming up fairly soon. Mr. Dowler, can you remind us when our first conversation on that is?
Tuesday.
The way the schedule kind of looks right now, we wouldn't actually be getting into the details of the budget with council specifically until November 25th, which 25th, 26th, and 27th would be the typical budget workshop days, where we delve into more of the details. The budget itself will be out and available towards the end of October. So,
and I know there's some preliminary discussion items coming up, starting with the first one at next week's council meeting. So.
Yeah. Okay, I think I've said my piece on the MSI and allocation, and I very much understand the process. And we have a reserve study to worry or to take into consideration. We have MSI, we have the provincial stimulus money, and I think that it's probably prudent to look at that big picture as part of the budget if the 425 is going to get us, till snowfall and freeze up anyways. So I think I'll leave it at that now, maybe, unless anyone else has any more ideas. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McGowan-Swain.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm not a big fan of splitting this up, 425 now and coming back later. I obviously appreciate what Mr. Dowler is saying here, but I don't think anyone on council would ever be in a position to say yes to 425 now and then, build, 30%, 40% of this, what we're looking for, and then say no in another 6, 8, 12 weeks or whatever. Personally, I'd just rather allocate the capital there, figure out, okay, if it's coming from MSI, let's use that, let's get that all in. We recognize that the number isn't going to be 100% accurate, but at the end of the day, Paul, Mr. Suda, it gives him a chance to be able to work with this. Then we don't have to come back and have the discussion. For me, I'd just rather do it one fell sweep, show that we are committed to doing this, and put all that, the MSI in there up front on top of the allocation that we've already supported here. So for me, straightforward, then we don't have to come back and address it. And whatever we spend, if we don't spend, we'll just come back into the pot for lack of a better term. And again, if we did need more, then they would come back to us. But I think council at this point, from what I'm hearing today, we're committed to this. So why not just get this done and move forward with it? That would be my 2 cents.
Okay, so quick clarification question for me. Are you wanting to allocate the whole 3.7 to the multi-use field and the ball diamonds? Is that where you're headed with this?
Good clarification. Sorry, and apologies for not being clear on this. So no, I'm just talking about the west. I think it's prudent for us to come back in the budget workshop to look at the 3.x for the multi-use football field. That is, I think Councillor Barnhart raised some good points about that conversation, and obviously the economic outlook for us will be interesting coming up at the end of November there. So me personally is let's commit to the west right now, put whatever funding is needed in there, and then bring that separate but related project back, the 3.x for the multi-use field at budget time.
Okay, so just to keep the math clear in my mind, we're talking about approximately an $800,000 ask to hit that 1.22 mark.
Correct.
Comments from Councillor Danlock?
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. You are correct, sir. I agree the same. I feel comfortable allocating the entire additional 800,000 to fund the project in its entirety based on some rough figures from Mr. Suter. I like the idea of being able to do it right now because it does allocate the existing MSI from 2020 we have in our reserve. Going into our budget deliberations at the budget workshop, we're talking about additional money left over in next year's allocation. So I'm okay with, I'd prefer to actually also to allocate the additional 800,000 from the capital reserve that's funded by MSI and gas tax to have the approximately 1.2 for the West Acres project, please. Now, are you requiring a motion for that, or?
Well, yeah, I'm gonna need one. But it would be MSI, not reserves, that we're taking it out of. MSI gas tax.
I mean MSI and the capital reserve fund, but yes, thank you for clarifying that.
But yes, we would need a motion.
Okay. You want a motion?
We have one on the floor. I'm lost a little bit.
We don't have a motion on the floor right now. We're just discussing it.
Okay, I can make the motion, but I see Councillor Barnhart had a question, so maybe I'll hold off until.
Yeah, I was gonna start. Yeah, so we'll let Councillor Barnhart weigh in, and then I'll ask if somebody wants to make a motion. Then I'll come back to you, Councillor Monkhouse. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you very much. And just a question of clarification, and I believe it's either to CEO or to Mr. Dollar. By doing all of this additional money, putting this additional money into the capital budget for 2020, would we be in any way jeopardizing any other projects that you may or may not have brought to our attention at this point? I just don't have that big picture in front of me. So if this is, we have the money, there's no other priorities that are jumping up ahead of it. If you're comfortable, I'm okay with that. I just want to ask you that question.
I'll maybe take a stab at this, and then Mr. Schwartz can maybe add anything that he'd like after. The short answer is yes. There's a limited amount of funds, and from what I can see and gather, there's unlimited amount of projects that are, have their own virtues and needs in the community. So the short answer is yes, this does impair council's ability to fund something else that maybe is not on the radar at this point in time. But that's going to be the case. There's always a need to make choices. For me, this is a situation where in some cases or in some respects, it would be great to see the whole picture and be able to provide council with a complete picture of all of those needs and desires that are out there, so that a more informed decision can be made. But it's really in council's hands in terms of what council's comfortable with at this point in time. As been discussed earlier in the meeting, we do have unallocated MSI funding. And so the funding piece is not necessarily the question. It's just a matter of what else are you possibly passing up if you go ahead with this project.
If I could, Mayor, just a supplemental to that.
Sure.
So it sounds, what I heard you say, Mr. Dowler, hope I'm getting it right. We don't know what's coming ahead of us. We don't have a crystal ball. So something could come up and we might be at a loss to have all the funds we need. But this project being funded does not take away from any existing approved capital projects for this year. It's only the unforeseen projects that we may have a shortfall.
Yeah, Councillor Barnhart, that's a good way to summarize it. It definitely does not jeopardize any of the current existing capital projects that have been approved. It really is just a slight impairment, I'll call it, on the conversations for the 2021 budget and forward.
Thank you.
CEO, you have some comments or you're good?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Monkhouse-Swain.
I'd be much more comfortable leaving it at the 400,000, which gets us any construction that we might, if I understand correctly, gets us any construction we might need until the end of the year, and then reviewing all this at budget time for budget 2021, because then we can take into account all the other asks for funding, including the ones that, as Mr. Dowler has referred to, we conceivably haven't yet considered. So as long as the funding is adequate to ensure that construction starts and continues as long as the weather allows it, then I'm comfortable with that. And further funding, we fund it fully when we've got the design document, the design is finalized, and we can take that into account during a budget process when there are all the other considerations to be balanced against capital spending, would be my position. So I don't think I've got anything else to say.
Thank you. Councillor Monkhouse-Swain, do you have a
Yes,
comment or are you prepared to make a motion?
No, I want to reiterate that this isn't something that we're choosing to talk about in isolation. We spent 18 months on a recreation master plan where we had thousands of engagement, and the community told us that we need more ball diamonds. So, I respect, Mr. Dowler's response where we don't know what we don't know. I totally understand that. But what we do know is what the community has told us, right? We need more space. We need this recreation off-leash space. We need those ball diamonds. So I'll reiterate that. But again, I don't quite understand the logic, and I'll respectfully challenge you, Councillor Stout, of just putting forward only 425 now, and then we're going to go and see what that looks like next year, and then how that competes against everything else. So to me, you either support the project or you don't. If you want to hold off completely and wait to assess this ball diamonds in the budget process with everything else later on, then I don't agree, but then that I can understand the logic there. But to include 30-40% of it now with the potential to not fund it down the road, I think is a misuse of funds. I think we need to be a bit more direct here. We either support this or we don't. So yeah, I just wanted to comment there. Maybe I'll put the motion forward. Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, did you have any more questions, or was it more to speak on the motion itself?
No, I was going to comment on my initial and respond to Councillor Stout, but not much value in that. I would suggest a motion.
Okay, because I got to admit, when I first suggested it, it was more to do it once and get the right number, but because if you approve this project tonight, we have to fully fund it come later. So I'm good if council is willing to put another $800,000 towards it tonight. I think that would be prudent as well. Just bearing in mind that we may have to readdress minor shortfalls based on design later. So at this point, I think we've heard the discussion. I'm willing to entertain a motion if the council wishes to make it. Councillor Monkhouse-Swain, you prepared to make that motion?
Yeah, thanks. So the motion would be that council allocate an additional $800,000 from MSI to the West Acres project. Tell me if that's eloquent enough.
I think that's enough. Sorry, somebody. I think that's enough of a motion. That allocates the fund, it commits to the project, it commits to the community, we're going to get it done. Can I add a friendly amendment that we add the multi-use field project to be brought back to budget 2020 or budget 2021 so that we don't lose sight of that project has to go too?
You bet. Thank you. I wasn't sure if we were going to address that here or another motion, but I'm happy to make that friendly amendment.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. In my opening comments, when I was in support of the 425 and asking about allocating the MSI, I was pondering committing funds for the whole works, and then I backed off from that, hearing what it was going to be, and how that might impact budget deliberations. And then the current motion that's in front of us that commits to that west 80 acres, I think makes sense. I'm happy to support that. If a person was going to support 425, you're in for a dime, in for a dollar. So it's either this is pretty black or white on the 80 acres. So if you supported 425, then inherently you weren't going to build a parking lot and have 3 dirt piles sitting there. So if you approve 425, you're in, right? So I find it hard to be on the fence on this issue. So anyways, happy to support the motion at hand to commit the funds for the 4 Diamond Complex on the West 80, or the supplemental funds for the 4 Diamonds. Thank you.
Yeah. And so just to summarize the motion, we're allocating $800,000 for the West Diamond project and bringing the multi-use field back to 2021's budget.
Yep. Diamond / off leash. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, sorry. Concept 4 for community concept 4.
Okay, concept 4. Perfect. Thank you.
I don't want to get hung because I forgot to say that. So, fair enough. Further discussion on the motion, Councillor Daniluk?
Actually, Mayor Stewart, I was going to ask you to clarify the amendment to the motion, which you just did a moment ago. So I'm comfortable voting in favor of the motion when the question is called. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further requests to speak, all those in favor, please vote now. All those against? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that motion carries unanimously. Which brings us to, I think that's the last piece of business we have to cover for this project. I think it's going to be a great project for the community, and looking forward to seeing it get built. Mr. Suter, do you have enough now?
Thank you.
Information.
Yes, it's very clear to me where we're going now, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Talk to the CAO. Are you comfortable with where we landed?
Absolutely. We'll get some communications developed to get it to our public, and now we can tell them about a great project out in 80 acres.
Great. And once again, thank you very much to members of council tonight for giving up your Tuesday to have a special meeting to discuss this project. I think it's going to be a key project for our community, and really help expand our ball programs, and ultimately that multi-use field will help out our football and others. So thank you very much for your time tonight and all your hard work, and we'll see you next week at the regularly scheduled council meeting. And at this point, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.